What's up, recappers? You know, for every 10 failures tech prevents, it can still generate its own. And it did for portions of this podcast. The audio hits and misses, but we would not publish this if we didn't think it worth your while. We apologize nonetheless, but are confident you can still enjoy the brilliant Catherine Cooper, PhD, discussing why, for many American landmarks, it's either digital preservation or disappearance. Enjoy. Dr. Catherine Cooper, welcome, research scientist at the National Center for Preservation Technology and Training. A genuine welcome to the Recap Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
You were recapped along with Dr. Allison Horrocks, who we'll get to later, on account of some, frankly, emotional stellar photogrammetry and child height 360 virtual tours of Vermont's Slater Mill and Wilkinson Mill in partnership with the National Park Service. We're going to venture far beyond before and after that. But just to start, what are the Slater and Wilkinson mills and why are they important?
So these are two very early industrial sites in the United States. The Slater Mill was built in 1793 in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, and was the first instance of fully functioning cotton machining, water-powered machining in the United States. Lowell, Mass. might disagree. Bit of a rivalry there.
Yeah.
And then Wilkinson Mill came along a few years later in 1810 and became both another cotton mill operation as well as a machine shop. They built a lot of the tools and machines that were used in both mills. David Wilkinson, who was the second generation of the Wilkinson family at that mill, actually invented the screw lathe instrument machine that allowed for standardization of screws. Before that, they were all hand cut. And just not necessarily standard.
Absolutely. So from the onset of these two mills, was child labor
Yes.
an integral part of operation? I mean, that was...
It was expected. So Samuel Slater himself was a child worker in a mill in England. That's where he learned the business, where he started to get to know the machines. And he brought that with him to the United States to help when Brown and Almy wanted to start their industrial revolution in Rhode Island.
Mm-hmm.
And it isn't something that they were particularly concerned about the way we would be today. This was just the way it worked. It was good
Standard
for
practice.
everybody. It
Yeah.
gave the kids something to do. It gave them a trade. It provided them with labor.
Yeah.
So
It was viewed as almost just a consensus win. I mean, for all parties, including
yeah.
the child laborers.
Yes.
The times change.
Yeah.
So what exactly prompted this idea to make the virtual tours you enacted child height?
So this was actually something that was a bit of a dream child for me. We had been using Matterport at NCPTT for a couple of years at this point, and we were trying to figure out how can we be more innovative with the application of this technology. And I kept saying, we need to do a child's height tour. We've never done one that wasn't, average adult height. And I've been watching my niece and nephew grow up and how their perspective of the world is so different from mine or their parents, for example. But I didn't want it to be a gimmick. So it had to be appropriate to the story we were trying to tell. I went to high school in Rhode Island, so I was familiar with the mills. And I was so excited when they got moved over to the Park Service. So I reached out and sort of pitched an idea and said, what do you think?
Yeah.
And they were all on board. The superintendent, Eric Brekowitz, bought in, the interp team, Kevin Kleiberg, Allison Horrocks, they all bought in and just wholeheartedly supported the project. And it became a really true partnership from there.
Unbelievable. So, Dr. Horrocks, and again, the origin of all this was this stupendous article, I believe on the National Park Service site.
Yes.
That I initially found, and you and Dr. Horrocks were the authors. Mm-hmm. So that is the origin story of all this. Who is Dr. Horrocks?
So Dr. Horrocks is a ranger at Blackstone River Valley National Historical Park, which these two mills are part of that site now, along with a number of other historic structures and the waterway. They talk a lot about the Pawtucket Falls, which of course are the power for these mills. And she is an expert on women in labor's history. And she is passionate about telling these stories, about really making an impact. So working with her was such an absolute joy because I am not an expert on this site. I know it exists. I have been to it a few times. So I could provide the technical expertise on the child height scanning and doing recording of audio, but she's our storyteller. And the other critical aspect to it that we both agreed on very, very early is we didn't want our voices to show up in these models or the interpretation. So we worked with local community members to find children of appropriate ages to the child workers at the mills to read the narrations that she wrote.
Wow. What was that process? I mean, you're essentially recruiting voice actors in a sense.
Yeah.
Was that a daunting task?
I reached out to friends of friends who had children of the appropriate age and basically asked if they wanted to be involved in a national parks project, and kind of got resounding yeses all around from parents and the kids. Young man in one case, he was in high school, and it was just such a delight to work with them.
Certainly. How gratifying.
Yeah.
An experience for them. I mean, they're familiar with the mills, obviously, but that level of participation and immersion, that's really something. Wow. So what we've talked about, I mean, you mentioned you went to high school in Rhode Island?
Yes.
You're in Louisiana. We're also going to get there. So this is just an ultimate coincidence because they moved to the national park or became, what's the term, owned by the national parks? Monitored?
Given to?
Sure. Okay.
I don't know quite what the process is, but they are now under the National Parks' care instead of the old Slater Mill Association.
Okay. Got it.
It used to be a nonprofit. Still is partner, I believe.
So are you in Louisiana when you find out that two famous mills by which you used to live become, I'm trying to connect all these puzzle pieces because this is either a crazy coincidence or...
I was home for a visit and I'd known that the mills had moved over to the parks.
Okay.
And I was just really curious how it was going, wanted to meet who was there, just like, it's 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Let's go.
And look what happened as a result, though. Mm-hmm. Bravo. Excellent. So so that's how this project came to be. But in general, in partnership with the NPS, how do these projects, I mean, do you just get an email? Are you contracted out in 1 week? You're like, oh, I'm going to Kansas. What?
It's a huge range.
Okay.
So there are people who will cold call us, email and say, we saw you were doing this work. Could you come and do this with us? Could you come with Matterport, laser scanning, whatnot, depending on the particular needs of that park. Mm-hmm. Others are sort of conversations that we have with members of the community because we also work far beyond the parks and talking with community members about their concerns, their questions, their problems, and then helping them devise solutions that may or may not involve us or the technology that we're talking about today. And then the third is sort of the way this mill project happened, which is we get passionate about a subject and then we make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. You've mentioned Matterport a couple times. Is this just a strong preference? Is there a partnership? Essentially, I mean, what cameras and why? And for this particular project, what can you speak to in terms of?
So Matterport, I don't remember exactly why we got those as our first camera, but that was what we had at the office. Mm-hmm. And the technology is very user-friendly, so it makes it possible to do a lot of work very quickly without sort of the old-fashioned stitching of many, many photographs. Mm-hmm. And it also interfaces well with the National Parks website. Mm. So that was another consideration. At the time we did the mill project, we had just barely gotten our Pro 3. Mm-hmm. Before that, we'd only had a Pro 2, and then we would do outdoor scans with the Theta, Rioc Theta, mm-hmm. because the Pro 2 had trouble with direct sunlight.
Okay.
So the interesting thing is now that we have sort of this larger suite of cameras, we will be selective about what we use where, depending on what the needs of the project are. So with the mill project, we use the Pro 2 on the interiors and the Pro 3 on the exteriors.
Got it.
Because it really helped with the perspective and the way the lenses are set up. You get a much clearer image when you're having to pan up and down using the Pro 2. If it's just sort of a quick project of scanning a building for taking measurements or planning a retrofit or a new exhibit, which are other options, usually just go quickly through with the Pro 3 now. Mm-hmm. And let's see, one of the most recent ones where we did the combination of the Pro 2 and the Pro 3 again was the property owned by Lillian Smith. She was a very important author from Georgia. Mm. And we wanted to make sure that all of the books in her library, that someone who was visiting that space would be able to read the spines. So we set the camera at 3 different heights in front of each bookshelf, so you could look at each individual shelf and
savvy. Well
see
done.
what the organization of the books was.
Yeah, absolutely. So with hopes of advancing a possible sense of these mills for the audience, any other specific just capture obstacles, things that went awry or things that you underestimated in terms of difficulties and...
So it was my first time out with the Pro 3.
Yeah.
I hadn't realized how off balance it was.
Okay.
So when you set it on the tripod, it's actually on one side of the base of the camera. Mm-hmm. So it has a weight differential. Mm-hmm. So that was when I had to be fully aware of, I need to level my tripod.
Yeah.
And cobblestones are a challenge.
Oh boy.
Cobblestone slope. Challenge. Yeah. The other was buses.
Uh-huh. Oh, we talking like tour or
no,
just like municipal?
Just city buses. So one of the major hubs in Pawtucket is right next to Wilkinson Mill, which is right up against the street, and trying to get the front of Wilkinson Mill so people could see the bell tower.
Got it.
And the rangers who were there that day, they put on their safety gear. They stopped traffic for me. So I could run into the street and just like start doing as many shots as fast as I possibly could. But there was one bus that got a little too close for comfort as it was pulling in to park at a stop.
Sure. Buses, okay. That's, yeah. Oh, reality capture life. So at a 10,000 foot view, I mean, looking back on this project now, how did this focus on child laborers alter your interpretation of the Industrial Revolution and its history? And
it made it a lot more visceral for me. I mean, you know, but you don't know. Mm-hmm. So walking around with the Matterport basically set like here on me instead of here, it's a bit surprising. And then just thinking about the noise and the scope of these machines that these kids are working with. One of the things that we did in Wilkinson was we turned everything on. at the same time that could run at the time and just recorded the amount of noise.
Wow. So they're still
wired.
a wealth of
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
Off of that, I mean, were there moments at any stage of this that were just standout emotional impacts? That could be the story of one particular child. It could be a family, an accident.
I wouldn't say there was any necessarily particular instance. This is a story that for me probably had more emotional impact because it's not one that I was as conversant with. But this is a story that Allison and her colleagues have been telling every day since they started working for the park there, that Old Slater Mill has been telling for decades.
Mm-hmm.
They took over the site right after it stopped being a mill.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the other thing, which I think has more emotional weight, is listening to particularly Slater Mill's narration and hearing a child talk about working.
Absolutely.
What it would have been like.
Just that choice to forego the probably expected in most similar experiences for attendees, but having a child's voice tell instead of just, it's almost like it becomes less theoretical, more realistic when as opposed to hearing just an adult recounting a story, you know.
Yeah. And it's to play on multiple senses, because looking at a virtual model, you may notice that something's a bit off, but you might not know why when you're moving through the space. You put a child's voice together with that, and then you sit there and go, oh.
Yeah.
At least that's the hope.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't imagine the intensity, I mean, to that. So well done. The timeline between, I do want to go back to one aspect of the minutia of this project, but timeline and duration just between the capture, after the difficulty of the buses and whatnot, to virtual tours, ironclad, ready to go.
Things always take time.
Yeah.
So I can't give you an exact timeline on this because time's being a little weird right now. Fully admit that. But
Yeah.
collected the scans, brought them back, cleaned them up, and then started working with Allison and the team at Blackstone River to start working on, okay, what tags do we want to add? What interp, what historic photos, any historic documents? What is the interp going to be? As well as working on writing those narrations. And the thing that actually took longest, and the reason there was such a gap between when we really finished the project, the interp side of it, and then putting it up on the website, is that these tours needed to be fully ADA compliant. So accessibility was still is very important. So this means that in the narrations, there also has to be significant description of the space. So what a sighted person would see needed to be described. So I didn't quite get away from having my voice in the narrations because the fastest and most efficient way to do that was to sit there, write the descriptions, work with Cara, who's in charge of that for the park, who's absolutely phenomenal, and just sort of go through and tweak, okay, how much detail here, how much detail there, where should I splice it in?
Yeah.
And then go through and splice the entire thing.
So if I can pause you here, because I'm actually fascinated by this. The actual writing of the narration, is this you and Cara, you said? Is it?
So Allison wrote the narration for the history of the park.
Yeah.
Cara, who, I can't remember her title, but she is in charge of their web materials for both Blackstone River and actually New Bedford, she is the one that was helping me make sure that everything was fully ADA compliant and good to go for the website.
Great.
Which means we needed to sit down and determine how much detail needed to be added at any given location. So is it the measurements of the space? Is it the finishes of the floor? Do I need to name every single instrument or machine? Or can I just say cotton milling machines? Mm-hmm. Things like that. So those are the sorts of questions we have to sit and think about. And then also, what does this look like as a transcript? How do you do this with subtitles? Where does everything belong? And it was a process, but I think we're really, really happy with how it turned out. And we hope everyone else is too.
I would hope so. Seriously. It's a beautiful effort. And clearly it takes a village. I mean, I know, again, off of discovering the article, I suspected there were more hands involved, but clearly it was a Herculean effort.
Absolutely. I mean, I was being trained by our videographer. It's on staff at NCPTT because I'd never edited a video in Adobe before. And I was sitting there with a mic in one hand and my hand on the mouse in the other. It's like, okay, let's see if I can record this over here, immediately splice it in over there. And there's a learning curve to everything.
Yeah. Can't even imagine. Okay, so Catherine, the NCPTT, we've mentioned a couple times, National Center for Preservation Technology and Training. Can you just explain the interplay between NCPTT and the National Park Service?
Absolutely. So NCPTT is an office of the National Park Service that is entirely focused on the application of technology to the preservation of cultural heritage. Define both of those as broadly as you possibly can.
Preservation of cultural heritage. Okay. Yeah, that can be a broad brush.
And technology is also extremely broad. One of the examples we like to use is that a pencil is technology. So... And NCPTT is located on the campus of Northwestern State University of Louisiana and has been since its beginning. So we have a really wonderful partnership with that institution as well that has enriched the work tremendously.
Northwestern State University of Louisiana?
Yes. Wonderful. NSULA, not to be mistaken for Northwestern University.
Okay. That's definitely not... Is that
Chicago?
Okay, yeah. So, okay, we alluded already to this broad brush now because I wanted to ask about some ancillary projects and other ones that I just upon my reading discovered. Yeah. So, if you're ready for some
Go for it.
The Slave and Tenant Dwellings Project.
Slave and Tenant Dwellings Project. This is the brainchild of Jason Church. He was noticing that in Louisiana, in our local landscape in Natchitoches and the Keene River area, these vernacular structures were just disappearing at a rapid rate. And these are homes that were built, lived in by both enslaved individuals as well as the tenant farming period, which was after emancipation. Mm-hmm. And these are small homes, relatively unassuming, but they are such an integral part of the history of the region. And they were just, there used to be hundreds, and then there were a handful, and then there were a few. So the goal with that project has been to document the structures that we can find that remain, so that there's a record of what this vernacular architectural structure is, how the form looks. But then it also expanded so far beyond that, so it's basically other buildings that were utilized by enslaved and tenant farmers. So cotton gins, churches. So it has expanded drastically. But the importance of these structures isn't just the architecture, it's the people who lived in them. It's the family stories. It's the memory, exactly. Yeah. So oral history became a really big part of this project. So family members who remember growing up in these houses could because these homes were lived in until very recently. And it's been this really wonderful sort of tie to both local as well as a much broader regional community. So the documentation team has gone out and scanned structures in Louisiana, Mississippi, Georgia, Florida, South Carolina, Virginia, Maryland. It goes further north than most people really expect. And oral histories the entire way along.
Wow.
So,
what are the Rosenwald schools of Louisiana?
So the Rosenwald schools, generally speaking, for the entire country, were a collaboration between Julius Rosenwald, who was in charge of the Sears and Roebuck Company, and Booker T. Washington from Tuskegee. And they wanted to make it possible for Black individuals, people of color, to have access to public education, which was not available to them in segregated South. In Louisiana, there were 395 of these structures that were built. Each of these structures would have been built as a collaboration between the Rosenwald Initiative, don't remember the exact language that they used to describe it, and the communities that these structures were built in. So Rosenwald would put up half the money, and the community was responsible for the other half. And they also had a very important African-American architect who designed all of these schools. There was a bit of a catalog that people could choose from to decide what worked best for their community. 1-room schoolhouse, 7-room schoolhouse. Do they need a teacher's residence? Do they need a workspace, a workshop? And so 395 in Louisiana.
I was doing the calculus and I'm like, that's a tremendous amount.
It is. And there were over 5,000 built in the States, in the country.
Wow.
And only 20 remain standing in Louisiana. So after desegregation, the schools then either moved, were left to disappeared. But Brian Davis, who's the executive director of the Louisiana Trust for Historic Preservation, this has been his passion project. He wanted to find all of the remaining schools in the state, or the remaining buildings, including teachers' residences, and basically learn about them as much as he possibly could. He brought in NCPTT as a partner for documentation of these spaces, mostly leaning toward laser scanning, some Matterport as well. And then, of course, the oral histories, because almost all of these Rosenwald schools have school associations and alumni associations. They come out, they have reunions. It's a very passionate and integrated community. So, going to reunions, scanning historic photographs, taking oral histories, embedding that into these models. And both this project and the Slave and Tenant project, works in progress at the moment, but both will have full story maps with all of the associated materials embedded in them.
Wonderful.
So.
Wonderful. The Vanishing Spaces project.
Okay. Very similar story, somewhat similar story to the Slave and Tenant structures. Jason and I had both been reading articles that had been coming out really close to the end of the pandemic, where researchers have been documenting the disappearing of gay and lesbian bars across the United States. So queer spaces are severely at risk in many locations, whether that's due to gentrification, shifting populations. Some people even blame social media, removing the need for in-person space. I personally disagree with that, but it's a theory. And so we'd been reading up on this. I was also doing podcast interviews with people who run LGBTQ archives across the South. So Frank Perez in Louisiana, and then Megan and Josh, who run the Invisible Histories Project, which is an LGBTQ archives project for the entire American South.
Goodness.
And it's really the promotion of finding and preserving LGBTQ history, which is very prevalent in the South, even if people don't necessarily think about that, because most people think New York, California, Boston.
More metropolitan areas.
But there's a huge LGBTQ history in the South.
In terms of pure time and just chronology, are we talking a newer history as compared to early? So this does go back, 100 years. Are we talking early, mid 1900s? It's like 70s and 80s sort of disco theme. This is back and historic.
This is historic.
Wow.
So Stuart Butler was an activist in New Orleans. There was already a very strong LGBTQ community in New Orleans by the time he got involved with them. You have activists in Texas, if I remember correctly, who were integral in trying to get rid of sodomy laws. So it's deep. It's deep in the South.
What a saga.
And so the partnership with Invisible Histories has really been making the documentation technology of Matterport and oral histories, which they already do so much of, and then partnering with them on the archival work to make this available to queer communities across the South that are watching their spaces disappear. So this can be at-risk sites like the Ferry Playhouse in New Orleans, which was Stuart Butler's home. He passed away in 2020. And the house kind of has a risky future. They're trying to save it. They don't really know what'll happen with it. To the Scorpio Lounge, which was the oldest gay bar standing in the Carolinas. It got pushed out. It was a rented space. They got gentrified out. And I found out the timeline on this one was insane. I found out on Sunday, made the plan Monday, flew there Tuesday, documented their last show, which was Halloween. Documented the space the day after, November 1st. They started gutting it on November 2nd.
The amount of just sheer history. This is just predominantly, this isn't, wow.
And if you want to know something fun about that one is I got to sit and read 50, 60 years worth of queer newspapers to dig up history on the Scorpio Lounge and embed those articles into the space.
What immersion.
It's so much fun. We're still planning oral histories for that one, but
Gotcha.
Because it was such a whirlwind trip, we didn't have anything lined up before I got there.
Yeah, of course.
It'll be a retrospect.
Absolutely. Plenty understood. The Louisiana Music Trail.
Ooh, this is a fun one. So another Jason Church special project.
Y'all seeing eye. It's Jason.
So basically, I can't remember exactly how we found the website or got the link, but someone had made a database listing of all of the juke joints and dance halls in Louisiana. But they only listed a very small handful in Natchitoches Parish, and we were just sort of didn't believe that. So Jason started looking.
Uh-oh.
So you can show up like at the McDonald's and talk to the locals and sort of say, and where did you used to hang out? Where did you go for dance halls, music.
Yeah.
So far, he has found 38 and still counting. Only a couple of them are still standing. I don't know if any of them are still running. But he was able to document one, I believe it was Rock's Groceries. Mm-hmm. And this sort of sparked a number of different partnerships, starting talking with Utah Valley University about what soundscaping juke joints and dance halls would mean, so both technologically and also ethically. Mm-hmm. So that sort of took off in one direction, and then the Louisiana Tourism Board found out about the project and said, we have the Louisiana Music Heritage Trail. What about combining this work with the music trail and really promoting not just the history, but the active spaces? So in the last year, Jason's taken Matterport scans of 3 different juke joints, and we're very excited to see those added to the website, hopefully in the near future.
Excellent. And again, all because effectively Jason kind of called BS, right? In a sense, right?
This
doesn't sound
totally
right.
fair.
What a whiz. Okay, one more just a Jason project I'm very curious about.
Okay.
And this one's just particularly uplifting. Can you speak to the 3D Digital Summer Field School? Is that, first off, is that right?
As close as I could get.
Okay. Yeah.
So
3D Digital Summer Field School.
This is a passion project for Jason that is really about training the next generation, about showing people that there is so much that they can do with this technology and getting the technology into their hands early. So the field school is specifically for people in high school. Mm-hmm. They can be rising freshmen in college. That's the oldest you can be. So haven't quite started yet. Or you can be an incoming freshman into high school, I believe. Don't quote me on that one.
Yeah.
But it's a field school for about 10 students, 2 solid weeks. And they get to scan buildings locally in Natchitoches that are historically important and really help tell the story of their own community. So the first year, there was the Morgan Hotel, a couple of churches. There's always the question of whether or not we can or should do people's private residences. So the first year was last year, actually. This year was the second year and repeated to just as much success. Uh-huh. And they added a grocery store and a coffin factory, if I remember correctly.
Coffin factory?
Yes. Funeral home, funeral parlor, and then the coffin factory. Which, huge history local to Natchitoches there as well, which I am not the expert to share. But the goal with this is it's a 2-week program. In the first week, the students all learn how to fly drones, run Matterport, do the photogrammetry and the modeling. The second week, they do oral histories with the community members, and they'll speak to people that they've seen in town their entire lives that they may not have actually stopped and talked to. And that's just such a wonderful thing to see, this intergenerational play happening. And then they do all of the editing themselves. They record the oral histories, they do all of the sound and video editing, and by the end of 2 weeks, they will have their own portfolios of scanned buildings, oral histories, and it's all up online.
Wow.
And they get paid to do this. They get paid as professionals to do this.
No kidding. In just 2 years, so it's ascended to this point. And this really is, I think, an illustration, well, a couple things that I think we often underappreciate. The skills that children might have, but also just the importance of this imbuing with skill sets for young generations.
And it's one of this also wonderful projects with Northwestern State University of Louisiana, because Jason co-teaches this with the Argo Lab, which is under JD. Afraid I can't remember his last name off the top of my head. Sorry, JD. And that lab helps co-teach this, and they teach the drones, and the kids get to use their labs, so they get to realize that they can go to school for this. Mm-hmm. There's a program right here in town where they could learn this, or they could go abroad or elsewhere and continue to apply this. And it's such a wonderful thing. And at the end, we've done this 2 years in a row, or Jason's done this 2 years in a row. There is a program at the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame, which is in Natchitoches, by the way. And every month they have something called the Louisiana Lanyap Lunch program. Lanyap.
Lanyap.
Do not ask me to spell it. Basically, it's a lunchtime lecture program, 45 minutes. It's on a Friday afternoon, and you'll hear someone talk about local history local to either the state, usually the region, northwest of the north central area of Louisiana. So the students, I really should stop calling them kids, but the students all present their work at the end of the 2 weeks. So
Wonderful.
They get to show what they've done to the community members that they have been working with and who have supported them and supported the program.
Outstanding.
So.
Wow.
And one more partner I forgot to call out. We get so much help from Cane River National Heritage Area with this program as well.
Great.
So.
What an initiative. That's tremendous.
Just amazing.
How promising. Okay, so one thing I wanted to hone in on, Catherine, so NCPTT, and specifically these last 3 letters, okay, so preservation, technology, and training.
Okay.
I mean, just how wide of a scope does exist for preservation? Is there anything just far beyond what we've covered? And
oh, so much.
what's sort of the most novel or rogue project, or things that just, this item doesn't belong in this group project, kind of that might surprise those familiar?
Oh, wow. So one of the things I will say that is my bread and butter that has not been mentioned here whatsoever is I do a lot of mortar analysis. I run an analytical lab at the center.
Mortar analysis. Okay.
So bricks and mortar.
Yeah.
Making sure that you go into a repair for historic structure with an appropriate material.
Okay.
So that you don't cause damage.
Great.
So we actually have had a series on our Instagram, which was a Halloween horrors series. And the mortar ones always seem to get pretty decent traction. The one that sort of made me cringe the hardest was someone going into an adobe structure and repointing it with Portland cement. And so all of the adobe melted.
That's a bad move.
Yeah. So that's why we do mortar analysis.
Pro tip, you don't want the adobe to melt. Okay. Lesson learned.
So mortar analysis is kind of my bread and butter. We get a huge range of questions on the analytical side. So I'll run research projects on what consolidant works best with paper shale fossils from Fluorescent Fossil Beds National Monument to what is the original paint scheme of a prairie-style home in Monroe, Louisiana. And then we've also got other projects and initiatives like trying to set up the first drone team for cultural resources in the Park Service, or teaching window repair workshops, or cemetery cleaning, or basically getting people interested in preservation and giving them the tools to do the work.
You just sent my mind in 8 different directions. Cemetery cleaning. So we're not talking just a rake and a rag.
No. So how to properly wash a headstone And then if you really want to get more involved, how to reset a headstone, how to re-level a headstone, how to repair a headstone.
A to Z.
A to Z.
Wow. So NCPTT, this first T, technology.
Technology. Technology can be anything.
So the apex of it right now, I mean, what technologies are currently embraced and as much as you can speak to it being considered for adoption and implementation?
So this is, the suite we already have is an interesting mix of remote sensing and sort of the remote capture and reality capture technologies. So GPR, Matterport, laser scanning. We're starting to get a little bit more involved with virtual reality and augmented reality. So we have our first preview accessible building, which is one of the Rosenwald schools. I believe it is St. Olive.
Okay.
And then we have our analytical suite, so everything from X-ray diffraction to portable X-ray fluorescence, Fourier transform infrared spectroscopy, to teaching traditional methods. So I'm currently doing a research project on bussillage, which is the local earth and architecture of Louisiana, which is a dying art.
Can you spell that one?
B-O-U.
You really do not have to. That's fine. No.
The answer is yes if I'm given a piece of paper and a pen.
It's such an alluring sounding word.
It's
okay,
French.
please. Yeah.
The thing about what we want to see come in is we want to be surprised. I want to see someone come in with something totally out of left field and say, have you considered this? Because there is so much out there that was developed for another field that we may not even realize exists. And that is a wonderful, wonderful thing.
Yeah. That type of unearthing, right?
Yeah.
Because then you can also just imagine off of that how that can then serve as a launch pad and just the sort of onion layers that you can build just even from that. That's great. The final T.
Training.
What does this encompass?
So everything from the workshop that Jason teaches for high school students to making
that's the field school, the 3D,
the 3D field
summer
school.
field school, got it.
Yeah. To cemetery workshops, to mortar analysis workshops. I sometimes travel around with a mobile lab. I have a portable fume hood I can chuck in the back of a minivan. And I'll teach anyone how to do mortar analysis, because what better way to understand why this matters than to do it yourself? But it also means making as much knowledge about preservation accessible as possible. So we historically had a long-running podcast on various technologies and the most up-to-date research. We have done pamphlets and briefs on how to do wet salvage recovery. We have done videos on a lot of the cemetery work, but also little introductory videos about what is this instrument in the lab and how do we use it in preservation. Because people who may have been introduced to, say, XRD, FTIR, excuse the alphabet soup, in a chemistry lab might go, but how do you use this with buildings or objects or cultural heritage? So that's kind of what it is, but it's also a what do you need us to teach? And even if we can't teach it, we can usually make the connections. So one of the things that has been said of this office since before I started is it's a very small office of the Park Service, but we have a lot of connections, and that is how a lot of the work gets done.
Okay. If you could quantify, just loosely, how much of your work, your output, is straight up documentation of sites versus the training aspect? And which would you say, I don't want to say you prefer, maybe is more gratifying of the two? Is it 50-50, do you feel like? Is it?
It depends on the year.
Depends on the year. Okay.
I'll say that. Documentation, I'd say, is a pretty hefty proportion of our workload. I'd say that's about 50% of the technical services contracts that have projects that we've worked on in the last few years. Sort of, opposite mortar analysis, paint analysis. They take significantly less time than, say, paint analysis of the entire interior of a home. But with regards to training, there's only so much capacity we can meet doing it ourselves. So I don't know, it's probably a quarter, maybe,
Understood.
if I had to give it a number.
Yeah.
If I sort of say, okay, among everything else.
And in terms of pure, let's call it enjoyment for you, is that a
Oh, don't make me choose.
Not choose. I mean, was it something that, yeah. Like picking your favorite child, right? I mean, they're both deeply satisfying.
See, that's the thing about this job that I love so much is a different question every day.
Yeah.
And I get both the satisfaction of learning so much myself, both about the history and the technology, but also sharing that with other people. So there is an absolute joy in being able to have someone come into my lab and teach them how to do mortar analysis themselves. I've had people show up with samples and say, hey, could you run this? It's like, no, but you can. I'll walk you through it.
Empowerment.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So nice. Okay, so Catherine, we've talked at length about your organizations and various projects. I really want to dwell on Catherine the practitioner, though. Okay. And leading off with when this mission of preservation became important to you.
I can't think of a particular nucleic instance, shall we say. I've been going to national parks since I was very young. I've been going to museums since I was very young. It's kind of always been there. I remember first learning about conservation as a field when I was in college, and we had casts that were from the Chicago World's Fair in the museum. I think they were visiting, I'm not positive. But as part of our art history course, we were able to sit and learn a bit from the conservator and actually get our hands on, Q-tips and things like that and do a little bit of cleaning. But I really didn't come back to preservation until grad school. So preservation of culture and history, yes, but not in the fully practical sense, more academic. Okay. Until grad school, and I really, really fell in love with it.
Mm-hmm. Was it just incidental? Was it a recommendation of a
it was
peer?
The combination of things. It was the lab that I was working in at the time was inside the Museum of Anthropology at UBC in Vancouver. So I got to be inside this phenomenal museum every single day.
That'll do it.
I loved it so, so much. But really starting to get my hands dirty with preservation and learning that it is this combination of artistic and scientific and cultural, and just this wonderful synergy of all of these things that I loved so deeply, was I had to take courses for my PhD, and I'd run out of courses in my own discipline, so I started taking conservation courses at the museum. It was related. I loved it.
Yeah.
So.
Would you also say around this time was when you, not to over dramatize, but fell in love with just the power of technology?
Oh, that came much earlier.
Okay, do tell.
So during my undergrad, I specifically chose a college so that there were no graduate students.
Huh, okay.
And that meant that I not only had face time with the professors, but I also got to do independent research in undergrad. And I was running a scanning electron microscope with electron energy dispersive spectroscoper. Let me take that again.
Do it 3 times.
Yeah. So I got to run an SEM EDS scanning electron microscope with a detector on the back end by myself independently my junior and senior years of college. And this is an instrument that allows us to see things at the nanoscale. And I was enraptured. So I was able to take all of these questions I had from archaeology and apply chemistry and analytical science to addressing those questions.
Wow.
And that's where that whole intersection
Absolutely
really, really clicked for me.
Ignition. One highlight and, if you'd be so kind, low light of the PhD journey.
Highlight's easy. Just being able to focus on one thing and dig deep. That's not something you get to do necessarily in any other position. So having the time and the space was amazing.
So you mean the entire journey, but also just the thesis and the whole...
Yes, even though I probably hated the topic by the end of it, because you just sit with it a little too long.
Almost pure exhaustion. It was
exactly, but there's a huge satisfaction in it.
Mm-hmm.
Low light. There was some shuffling that happened the last year of my PhD, and I had to switch supervisors.
Okay.
That was incredibly challenging.
Oh, wow.
So.
Understood. Okay.
But it worked out.
So supervisor swap was quite the curveball. You know, we talked earlier, it was really engrossing, and just the youth and the 3D digital field summer school and learning curves. How would you describe your learning curve specifically with reality capture, photogrammetry?
I don't know if this is a description of the curve, but on the job.
Okay.
It is something that basically we got the instrument in, we started to do work with a local partner, Cane River Creole National Heritage Area, and we were just trying to figure it out. So
like a lot of failure, but of the valuable kind, and just trial
absolutely.
and error.
And every single time I go to a site, there's something new, something different. Mm-hmm. I'll think I have the answers, and then suddenly I don't. So the first site was when we realized that when you start a model on a device, so cell phone, tablet, whatnot, you can't switch devices. Unfortunately, we'd started that one on someone's cell phone, so we kept stealing that cell phone.
The old recurring theft move.
And then it's like, okay, now each device has its own dedicated tablet, and then we don't have to worry about it if you start passing a project off to somebody else. So that was one. The one that I still wish I could find a more elegant solution for was doing the masts on the schooner Ernestina Morrissey.
You got to 0.5x that one again. Okay, the masts, that I got. The masts on do what now?
So the masts, so they're on the schooner Ernestina Morrissey in New Bedford, Massachusetts. So we were asked to create a digital twin of this historic ship, schooner, two-masted, wooden 1890s,
Beautiful.
I believe.
Wow.
Gorgeous. Just recently finished retrofit up in Maine, had just come back to dock. And it's this wonderful treasure. I don't know how else to describe it. It's just so important to so many different communities there. But wanting people to be able to see the views from the crow's nest with a scanner did not work out as I had imagined. So I was not permitted to go up the mast. I am not certified, trained, permitted. So I trained one of the ship's staff on here's the Riak Theta on a selfie stick.
Yeah.
And then he had to climb the mast, and every few feet we'd stop and he'd hold it like this on top of his head, so he'd try to be under it and hiding from it. While, strapped in with, harness and safety lines and things like that. Every few feet. In the end, it didn't quite work as we expected because the ship is still at dock. So it's not totally still.
Sure.
And of course, he's not totally still. So what ended up happening was I created a second copy, digital twin, where only those three locations, the head rigging out front, two masts, were the only places that existed in that particular model, and then I hyperlinked between the two places. Not elegant, but it worked.
Wow. No, you found a solution. Wow.
Because you could not climb the mast using the various pucks. You
may do. Excellent.
So there's always something new to learn.
As frustrating as it can be, it is also simultaneously one of the exciting parts, though,
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Especially when you have a deadline.
Yeah. The old pressure cookers. Yeah. Catherine, what site, the many you have been to, has pissed you off the most?
Oh. I'm going to answer this one in general terms.
This is fine.
It is incredibly challenging that most of the sites that we go into, this is the last line for the preservation of that space. There is no saving the building, whether it be because of demolition by neglect, lack of resources, gentrification, death in the family, whatnot. There is no saving this space. And that's really very challenging, and you sit with it. That this is what is going to remain, and wanting to tell that story for that community as well as we possibly can.
Is there a single site that stands out as having supplied you with the most hope or optimism about anything? Be it its own story or preservation and memory on the whole?
Ooh. The mill project actually has been one of the most amazing for me personally, because it really was this local personal connection. It was getting to see something in my head get turned into something real, but then also the response we've had to it. I don't necessarily always get to see what the response is, but
here you are, right?
Allison said that she's had emails from people all over the world. There was a man in Sweden who contacted them because he was taking measurements off of the Matterport tours to rebuild some of the historic tools in the machine shop. It's just amazing what this community can do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the reception, as much as it pleases me, it couldn't be less surprising as, again, I mean, I found the article and it was superbly written and clearly executed project-wise to manifest the article. You know, we mentioned earlier how it really did take a village. How the hands involved so far exceeded the two names authoring this article, you and Dr. Horrocks. Have you ever disagreed with someone about how a site should be portrayed?
I always feel like there's something we could have done better.
Okay.
So we do the best with what we can, with what we have, within whatever limitations those may be. And sometimes there is a bit of a bittersweetness to it, of knowing that there's something missing.
But nothing stands out as an instance of sort of intense differing of visions as to how something's captured, how the virtual tour will come to be, or this needs to be omitted because it's it's normally a pretty harmonious endeavor with all these parties involved.
It can come down to discussion, absolutely. But I am always fully aware that this is usually a community partnership, and they get the final say.
Even off of that, and you don't have to get specific, but I just am too curious. That level of deference, has it ever been difficult? And it can just be yes or no. You don't have to cite any specific cases, but difficult for you to, I really want, even just subjectively, like I really want this, or I don't want to do that, but you still defer. And
I can cite a site where I've gone rogue.
Oh, here we go. Here we go.
Basically, periodically I'll show up on a site, they'll literally hand me the keys and say, have fun.
Carte blanche. Wow.
And I'll basically say, look, I'm going to scan everything in this building, every nook and cranny. I'm going to get into the attic. I'm going to get into the basement. I'm probably going to go where you don't want me to go. We can just turn those pucks off later. But we have the data. Yeah, no, that has definitely been something where I err on the side of extra data, and we can finesse what is available to the public later.
Still off of that, have you ever had to decide, maybe it was because something was maybe too graphic, too speculative, anything too charged, where you're like, we're just going to not.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then trying to work around it was a lot of fun. So there is a bookstore that was, let me back up. In Charlotte, when I did the documentation for the Scorpio Lounge, I had a little extra time. So I said, look, is there anywhere else you want me to document? Just, I'm here. What else do you need to the community? And I was told that the last LGBTQ bookstore in the area was still around, not necessarily at risk, But the newspaper, the oldest still running queer newspaper for the Carolinas, their offices were in the back. And there's two very important community murals on the outside of the building. So they really wanted a detailed scan that they could add interpretation to of the newspaper and the outside murals of the building. The bookstore contained things that probably would not be appropriate on public television. And there's not really much you can do about that. That is the nature of the store. That is what's there. And depending on who would be hosting this particular scan, which we didn't necessarily know quite at the time, the level of detail would be different. But my solution was to connect the two parts of the model I had to go through the store. Was I literally took a jumping shot. It's the longest distance I've ever taken a Matterport shot between two locations, and jumped from right inside the front of the store door to right in front of the back room door.
Love it.
You can still see roughly what's in the store, but there is nothing graphic that is available from those two locations.
Savvy. Well done.
It was harder to move the cars out from away from the mural because that was in the parking lot. Mm-hmm. But that's one instance. But we have those discussions every time we scan someone's private residence as well.
Which project has supplied you with the most lessons?
Oh.
That could be about the technology. It could be about the history. It could be about you, how you like to work.
I'm going to say the Ferry Playhouse, which is the site in New Orleans. It was Stuart Butler's home. It is still beloved by the extended Ferry Playhouse family. And it was our first site that was for the Vanishing Spaces project. It was our test case. So I learned a lot, not only about scanning, but scanning with people still living in the house. It was also the first time I got to sit down and do oral histories with members of the community. So that was a learning curve. But also, it was such an enriching experience to really learn how to be with that community and build something for them. It was one of my very first projects. And I still get phone calls from them and go to family events. So
fantastic. Who, and boy, if this answer is going to be Jason Church, I'm going to lose it. Who has taught you the most about anything?
I have learned so much from everyone around me, pretty much my entire life. At least I hope I have. One of the things I think I have learned to appreciate more and more and more as I have grown in this profession, as I've gone from early career professional to edging into potentially established, was in high school, started working for an ecology and evolutionary biology lab at Brown. And the PI, primary investigator, was Dr. Annie Schmidt. She watched me as a high school student, home on every holiday, from college through grad school, go from a young adult to a colleague, and helped me make that transition, and did it with such grace. So in graduate school, I came back to her and said, look, I just read this classic archaeology paper on the importance of regional data on carbon isotope variation for plants. They used too many species, too many time periods, and we can do better. The project I worked on with her would be an amazing baseline to really dig into why or how do these isotopes vary geographically, temporally, in one species. So making that transition of being a high school student to being a colleague and publishing a paper with her, I hope I can extend that grace to somebody else and help them with that growth and not just continue to see someone as a kid. So I have learned so much from Annie. So much.
What's your favorite photo? Or we can call it image.
Ooh. I'll stick with photo. And there is one that comes to mind. It was taken by a friend. I believe he was on a trip to France. It sits on his mantle, or it used to sit on his mantle. He has since moved. And it is a shot from the interior of a home into the courtyard. But he focused the camera so that you can see the historic glass, and the view behind it looks like a watercolor painting.
Goodness.
I could stare at it for hours. I don't think it's anywhere other than his house.
No.
I don't think it's anywhere other than his house, but I still think about it. I first saw it 2012.
We'll have to live in myth in this conversation.
Oh,
wow.
It's magic.
Captivating. If you could assign one piece of fiction, a novel, film, or poem, to accompany a virtual tour, what would it be?
Okay. Do I have to pick just one?
I'm going to say yes. Creativity within constraints, Catherine.
Okay. I'd say if you view Lillian Smith's home, any of those properties, you should read one thing she's written. So her first fiction novel was Strange Fruit. Her nonfiction she's most famous for is Killers of the Dream.
And you would think those would best coincide with her home.
It's a window into what she was thinking about, what she was struggling with, what she was advocating for in that place. And it has been staggering to me to read her work and realize what has and hasn't changed.
Mm.
And she was writing in the 50s and 60s.
What's an opinion you
think on those dates?
that was the sort of peak of Miss Smith's deliverables?
She wrote, that's the part I'm struggling with, is I can't remember what dates she wrote the books.
Mm-hmm.
But she was a prolific writer. She was a prolific speaker. You can find collections of her essays edited by her partner, Paula Snelling. You can find copies of her letters to other amazing advocates, speakers, Eleanor Roosevelt, Martin Luther King Jr.
We'll pull up some images for this discussion, but can you speak to just the sheer aesthetic of this home? What makes it so indelible from just a structural and design standpoint?
So It is a property that she inherited from her father, who used to run a girls' camp in Clayton, Georgia, outside Clayton, Georgia. Clayton's a very small town that is nestled right at sort of the jointure of South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, and Tennessee. Beautiful landscape. What remains of the camp, her home, there's a small museum, there are a couple of cottages. Just looking at that space and it being a little ways out of town, beautifully nestled into a landscape, it feels almost timeless, partly because not much has been changed. But yeah, no, it's being able to walk into her library and open any book and see her notes. Or this one is out on display. Like, there's something that was signed by Martin Luther King Jr. Things like that. And just like her desk, her typewriter, and I'd never heard of her before doing this project. And I just want to learn more. There's a photograph of her and Paula that it just has a level of joy to it that I don't know how to describe. So, that's one. Yeah.
Tremendous. What is an opinion you hold about the future that has been informed by what we've learned about history?
There will always be someone who comes after us that looks at us and our work and says, why did they do it like that? I mean, we learn and we grow. That's the scientific process.
Sure.
We keep building on the shoulders of giants. Not that I really necessarily consider myself in that company, but someone will someday look at our work and go, well, that's outdated. And I look forward to seeing what the new take is.
Fascinating. That is also a two-way street, though, right? I mean, when we look at a Rembrandt, you're stricken with awe about but also other things are like, what is this garbage? Like, just whether it's 1980s, anybody? No, but things where it can really, really vary, and how fickle a beast that is.
Well, and I mean, this, the field changes so fast. Yeah. I mentioned that first model where we're at Cane River Creole National Historical Park, and we learned about the cell phone thing. That entire model, the way we designed that virtual tour, all of the things we put in to try to make it accessible, totally outdated. We would never approach it the same way. It's only been a few years.
Yeah. Yeah, goodness. Exponential change.
Yeah.
What do you think preservation looks like in 2035? No right or wrong answer.
I think it'll be a lot more community-based.
Okay, so larger group initiatives and
right, and communities having more access to the tools to preserve things themselves. So this is actually something that I think has already begun, has already started gaining momentum. Invisible Histories, for example, has leaflets and zines out on how to preserve your political campaign as it's ongoing. What does this mean in the digital age of social media and emails? And sort of the community deciding what to preserve and how to tell that story. I see it moving.
Wow. That is an eye-popping answer. I can't say I expected. Maybe it's the pessimist in me having this concern about the achievement of consensus, and that if we, boy, would I love to be wrong. It would just be a fascinating observation to see if that could be achieved, because I would just figure with essentially many cooks in the kitchen that I just wonder if anything would. But see, no, it almost feels like if it's a community, therefore they're going to know and have a sense of priority as to what is most essential and how something should be documented. And maybe I'm being overly negative, but do you know what I mean? Just with having this abundance of thoughts and opinions and approaches.
Oh, I mean, go to any family reunion.
Yeah, true. You know?
But
Interesting.
The thing is, I've also seen it work.
Yeah.
So the schooner Ernestina Morrissey, for example, the goal with that project was to have various members from differing communities that have an affinity or a relationship with that vessel tell their relationship with that vessel, even if there is some disagreement or some varying in priorities.
Sure.
You can creatively create a platform where they talk to each other.
That's great.
So
2035. Okay. Note to self. We'll be monitoring. Great answer. Great answer. If you, Catherine, had an unlimited budget and zero technical restrictions, what story from history would you most want to preserve or bring to life with immersive technology?
Honestly, I don't think I can name a specific story. I would be far more interested to sort of say, okay, I have unlimited budget and technology, and ask communities to come to me with ideas, to be honest.
So almost crowdsource the
Right. It's like
unlimited funds.
Well, yeah, and share it out.
Yeah. So you don't have, to put this another way, does Catherine have a beloved? It could be an era, maybe a figure. One whose memory is maybe not as populated in our minds as Catherine would hope.
So
unsung heroes, as it were.
Unsung heroes.
We talked about Lillian. I mean, that's already kind of a crackerjack answer.
Crackerjack, yeah. So the thing about it to me is that I fall a little bit in love with every project that I do. I have to.
Yeah?
Otherwise, it doesn't work. So, for example, everyone in this country knows Frank Lloyd Wright.
Certainly.
Most people don't know that two of the people who worked in his studio were Walter Burley Griffin and Marion Mahoney Griffin.
Definitely minority of knowledge. Sure. Carry on.
But they were actually incredibly important in the prairie style architecture phenomenon. Mm-hmm. And they are as famous in Australia as Frank Lloyd Wright is in the United States.
Okay, that's a good one.
And I knew nothing about them until I was asked to do work on the Cooley House in Monroe, Louisiana. It was their last structure that they designed and had built in the United States as their career was taking off in Australia. They'd won a competition to design the capital city of Canberra. And during that project, I actually started contacting people and working with the societies in Australia to dig up as much information about these two architects as I possibly could, because their story in the United States kind of faded away because Frank Lloyd Wright buried it.
Wow.
They left under a disagreement. They wouldn't take Japanese prints as payment. So they didn't want to be paid in kind. They wanted their salaries.
Yeah. Wow, so just a ruptured relationship.
Yeah.
This Australian contract, did this happen while they were?
It was after the schism.
Well, that'll show him in a sense, right? What a story.
But there's stories like that I want to learn and fall in love with. That
absolutely. It almost harkens back to, this is a little more prolific, but maybe my facts are not straight here. I believe, I'm treading on thin ice. I think Tesla was under Thomas Edison, was working either with or under, and then that whole duo had its schism, and they of course had the famous, the rivalry and AC/DC and all that. I'm really digging deep in the memory bank, but yeah. And just what became a war from hell from what was once a sound relationship. Fascinating. What's something that preservation technology can't yet do that you think one day it will be able to do?
So I don't know exactly how it's going to work, but I think that there is a lot of scope and potential for creative ways to preserve sites and histories that are disappearing. So I mentioned all of these structures that are going away through whatever means. And you see people creatively doing things with VR, AR, things as simple as here's a piece of plexiglass and here are the lines of where the roof used to be if you stand on this spot. So, two ends of a spectrum. I'm very curious to see where that goes.
You're making me giddy. A true or false question for you, Catherine. True or false, there are ethical limits to recreating certain historical spaces digitally.
Truth. Absolutely, there are ethical limits. This is something that I struggle with deeply because I work with living communities and wanting to preserve their stories, and who owns, has the rights to, can access, can use that data. That's something I struggle with all the time.
Not that it's adjacent, but I just find it odd and striking that this is at a time when, just the proliferation of AI and content and just data,
Yeah.
ownership. It's a unprecedented time, truly. And
it's, some of it's a safety consideration. So people still live in these buildings, right?
Yeah.
So I know that there is one home I have scanned. It will never be turned public until after they have passed away.
And is that something that's already agreed upon and signed documentation? Is that something that you just suspect will happen? How does that work? The legalese, as it were, about...
So, So that was a partnership project. And this is something that I would consider the best practice. To my knowledge, the paperwork was not done on my side. I was the technical person on the project. I do not know what the paperwork was. but I would never turn that public on my own. As much as that entire site and the oral histories make me giddy, and I love them so much.
Okay, Catherine, we've been through an ocean of information. Recap Nation devoutly enjoys fun, so if you'd be so kind, we're going to wrap up in a sort of rapid fire fashion. I think you have a flight to catch here sooner rather than later. So, what's a weird gift or skill you possess?
I am a trained calligrapher. I joined a guild when I was in grad school.
Calligrapher guilds, like Egyptian calligraphy.
That's actually a different little random factoid.
Oh, here we go.
So, ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, Middle Kingdom specifically, was my foreign language in college because I wanted to do drawing and grammar without having to talk.
What a one-upper you would have been at parties, by the way.
I am telling all of my 2 truths and a lie secrets right now.
Golden.
But no, a trained calligrapher with, my favorite is pointed pen. So copper plate, Weaver pointed pen. I can do italic, Gothic, Fraktur.
Have you ever been, commissioned to do anything if it's such a sort of exotic?
So when I was part of the guild in Vancouver, British Columbia, where I was introduced to this, we would occasionally get requests for people to do projects for them. They'd hire people, usually on an hourly or project rate, and you would work it out with the person who got contacted.
Mm-hmm.
I never quite knew what the back end looked like. I just occasionally get an email, they're in your neighborhood. Do you want to do this? Like, sure. I'll take pocket money. I'm in grad school.
Of course.
So weirdest ones. The most practically challenging one was writing an inscription on the mat for a poster from someone's wedding. And by poster. And trying to carry the mat for this poster across Vancouver. I did not have a car. And then where do you put this in a tiny little 1-bedroom apartment? And I actually put it on top of the harpsichord that lived in my apartment.
Ever resourceful, Catherine.
So that's one of the most random ones. The one that I think was the most challenging and I'm the most proud of was adding names to a World War II memorial book. This was a request long after grad school. It was for a church community that I was familiar with. And I just sort of get this question of, would you write, 10 names in a book for us? It's like, sure, I can do that. That's not hard. Mm-hmm. And then it turned into over 20 names, and it was vellum. I'd never worked on vellum before.
I'm sorry, please school me.
Vellum is skin.
Skin?
Yes. So calfskin. It's what used to be all of the sort of historic documents before paper. It was used instead of paper in many, many places for important documents. So this book was made it had vellum pages. It was already bound. The names had originally been inscribed in, I believe, 43 or 44, which is why there were some names missing. So I had to figure out how to match this historic calligrapher's hand, which was not a standard hand, her spacing, her font, her inks, and then figure out how to do this on vellum, which I'd never touched before in my life. in a bound book, so no mistakes permitted.
Talk about the pressure being on.
But I learned so much through that process. I had a wonderful time, in between the hair tearing. But I think that's the one I'm the most proud of.
Rightfully so. Wow. Wow. What skill sets, Catherine? Next, rapid fire. What's the worst job you've ever had?
I'd say the one that I had the hardest time with was working reception.
Okay.
At a drug research and development company. It wasn't my full-time job. I was filling in lunch periods for the receptionist, but the rest of my job was like moving equipment, calibrating things, dealing with the autoclave, purchasing forklifts, the whole 9 yards. So I'd show up to work in work boots, t-shirt, and jeans, and then have to go work reception in this relatively swanky, entry space in a brand new building. And it's like, this is not what they expect. So I used to keep a waistcoat that I could throw on over my t-shirts when I sat at reception.
Oh, the preparation.
And it just tried not to stand up. So people couldn't see oil on my jeans or holes in my shoes.
Been quite the acting job. Just this. Oh, Catherine, though, she's so insistent on just remaining sitting down. Wow.
Everyone at the company knew what I was wearing. It was the people who walked in for meetings with the CEO or CFO. I'm gonna stay seated and
yeah. You and NCPTT are based out of. Okay. Now, people do not go looking up this town's name and then try pronouncing it, because one is not like the other. Natchitoches?
Yes. Natchitoches, Louisiana.
Natchitoches, Louisiana.
Yeah.
Okay. Natchitoches. You and NCPTT are based out of Natchitoches, Louisiana.
Yes.
What's the best thing about the state that not many people would suspect?
So I think most people, when they think about Louisiana, think New Orleans. But there is so much diversity of culture and history throughout the state that varies across the state. So, for example, you think spicy Cajun food. Food differs above and below I-10. Please come up to Natchitoches, try a meat pie. Come to the Christmas festival.
So Natchitoches, let's do some geography here. So I-10 is the sort of vein of
I-10
Louisiana.
is east-west.
Yep. Okay.
And it goes sort of through Lafayette and Baton Rouge. Your other east-west is I-20, and it goes Dallas, Shreveport.
Gotcha.
Jackson. Yes. And then your north-south corridor is mostly going to be 49.
And so Natchitoches, you're saying come up
Yep.
to Natchitoches, try meat pie?
Yeah, so Natchitoches is 4 hours equidistant New Orleans, Houston, and Dallas.
Okay.
So we are an hour 15 south of Shreveport, 45 minutes north of Alexandria. So, yeah.
Excellent.
Best known for meat pies, Christmas festival, and being the oldest permanent European settlement in the Louisiana Purchase.
That is a claim to fame. All of those.
All of those.
We talked about unsung heroes, and now we've established an unsung vacation spot. Catherine Cooper, PhD. You do excellent work that the world needs. Thank you so much, and thank you for coming on the Recap Podcast.
Thank you for having me. This was delightful.
Indeed.